time behind bars, a life of crime, addiction, depression, homelessness. These outcomes are distinct possibilities for so-called youth at risk, young people in our community who are vulnerable due to conditions beyond their control, like a broken family, abuse, and lack of access to health care. What programs are available to keep them safe and steer them in the right direction? Join the discussion on youth at risk prevention programs. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha, and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. Adolescence is a challenging time for kids, and it can be compounded by factors out of their control. Youth who struggle with the stress of their lives may be at risk for making poor decisions unless someone intervenes. There are several programs and organizations aimed at helping kids change their self-destructive behaviors and empower them to become successful in life. Our panel tonight will discuss the help that is available for our at-risk youth. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You could email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Patty Kauhani is president and CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Hawaii. The organization serves 15,000 youth annually through 9 clubhouses on Oahu and Kauai. It offers after-school programs in a safe and positive environment. Annie Tui Olemotu is the assistant program coordinator for Haʻiʻi's Emergency Shelter. That nonprofit works with at-risk youth and their families, connecting people with services like housing, foster care, and counseling. Deborah Spencer-Chun is the president and CEO of Adult Friends for Youth. The group targets high-risk youth engaged in violent and destructive behaviors. Programs focus on healthy alternatives to gangs, violence, and flunking out of school. And Lester Orsino is a former gang member who got involved with the Adult Friends for Youth program. Hi, I'm back. Who got involved with the Adult Friends for Youth program during his freshman year of high school. He's married with 15-month-old twins and works at the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. I'd like to start with Patty Kauhani from Boys and Girls Club. 15,000 kids. Can you describe a little bit about how you work with those kids and your programs, and then give us a sense of how they were affected by the pandemic?
Sure. Aloha, Daryl, and thanks for having me. Our clubhouses and teen centers serve children from the age usually 7 years old through graduation from high school. So we welcome them into our clubhouses. We give them a safe place to be, caring adult mentors that want to help them succeed in life, as well as positive youth development programs. So we're usually an after-school program. We take the kids once they're finished school and we keep them engaged in positive activities so they're not out doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And we help them to not only graduate, but we want them to have a plan for their future, and we want them to feel that they deserve to be successful in life. So we work through all of these things with our kids, whether it's in the clubhouses or outreach activities. We love our kids. We build really strong relationships with them. COVID-19 created a situation where we couldn't be with them in person, at least for the first month. We were able to open up eventually in a revised capacity. We couldn't have as many kids, but we were able to pivot to virtual programs, and we created really creative, engaging things for them to do at home so that we could still keep in touch with them and stay engaged and still interact with them and their families.
You know, Annie Tui Olemotu from Haʻiʻi, you folks have a primarily residential operation. Tell us a little bit about that. And you basically are taking care of these young people as, you're stepping in for their families and so on. You are their family. That must have been really a challenge when they were all stuck at home with your folks, right? How did you adjust to that?
Right. COVID brought a lot of change in our emergency shelter. But we had to keep moving forward as business as usual because we cannot not take in the youth that were being referred over to us. In our emergency shelter, we work with youth who are involved with the family court, child welfare, and we consider walk-ins that are funded by the Office of Youth Services. And all of these referrals, we really had to look at how we could assure the safety and well-being for the youth that come into our program, not only for the youth, but also for the staff. So we had to take up a lot of different protocols. We kind of just followed as the proclamations were being made statewide, but nothing really changed as far as us receiving intakes and having youth discharged to families or whatever. We just had to do a couple of more steps on our side to make sure that everyone was safe. We were being cautious. We had to vamp up on all of the PPE, just make sure that everyone was okay.
Were you able to maintain your capacity though? I mean, how do you had X number of people in a house, you can't separate them. If someone actually got COVID, I can't imagine what you would have had to do.
Right. Thankfully, no one had tested positive for COVID throughout the entire time.
That's
But what
amazing,
we
actually.
did do was
That's actually
Right.
kind of amazing, right? I mean, you got to be thankful for that.
very thankful for that. Very thankful for that. But at the same time, we had to stay on our toes and just take all precautions as usual. We were able to sort of kind of isolate. We did extra steps in everyone who was coming into the shelters. We have people that come in throughout the week that do classes and stuff. So all of that had to turn into virtual classes. Another big change that COVID hit was the schooling, because our youth would come but attend their home schools. But with COVID, everything was in home. So we had to make adjustments on our end to just be sure to attend to all the youth tuning in virtually, to be able to provide enough electronics so that they could, attend to their virtual classes and whatnot. So it's definitely brought some challenges, but we were definitely up for it.
And then, and finally, Deborah Spencer-Chun from Adult Friends for Youth. You folks are dealing with kids who are extremely at risk of actual criminal behavior. How were you able to, first of all, how do you operate? Do you have, I know you have an office, you send out counselors. Do you have multiple facilities, or how do you outreach? And then what was the impact of COVID on your operation?
Well, most of our programs are mobile, so we do a lot of outreach, and we have our mobile assessment center, which we go out and we reach clients who are status offenders that are referred to us by the police department, and then we try to provide services. That was a hit from the pandemic, because we couldn't place too many kids into programs because a lot of programs had closed down, so we had to do our own modifying and counseling the kids ourselves. Our main program is the RT counseling, where we provide counseling on the school campus and in the neighborhoods. And obviously, because schools were closed, we couldn't do it on the campus, but it didn't stop our staff from continuing to do the counseling. Of course, with the amount of kids that you could meet at a time, we had to do many more sessions in a given day. So a group of 20 that we would have, we'd have to break them down to 4 groups. So there was a lot of work going on. We never stopped. We didn't close our doors. And then we had the mobile education center. And so with that really took a big hit. We had to actually modify our offices here, because we don't usually have big groups of kids here because everything's done in the community. But we had to modify so we could bring our kids in to do the online schooling that they needed to do, and actually go out into the parking lot. The great part about that was everybody here at our office, the building that we're in, was all working from home, so we could utilize the full parking lot to really go out and spread kids out and continue the distance learning. And so, being able to equip them with the right equipment for the online schooling, it was really tough because kids didn't have the Wi-Fi, nor did they have a lot of, but the main part is our counseling. And I think we had to continue that because the kids were under a lot of stress, the unknowns of what was going on during the pandemic. So our staff was really still out there. We tried like everybody else. We tried to close down and try to work from home, but the staff just didn't couldn't do it that way. So they continued to work.
Okay, great. Lester, you went through the Adult Friends for Youth program quite a while ago now that I think about it. But what kind of tools did they provide for you? What kind of state were you in when you first went to Adult Friends for Youth, when you were 15 years old? Do I get that right?
About 14 years old. I was a freshman. I guess from when I was in middle school, in Waipahu, there was a lot of, gang activities, just knowing the fact that You hear things that happen in the high school, you know, that kind of raised flags for me. Like I didn't even want to attend high school, Waipau High School, because of the things I've heard. Um, Hence, that's why I joined gang, just to have protection. So when I entered Waipau High School, there were already our gang was already, I guess, clients of Adult Friends for Youth, and that's how I was brought on.
And then when you saw what was going on with this pandemic, did you kind of go back in your mind to wonder how Adult Friends for Youth is doing? Do you still help them, by the way? Do you work with them, or are you involved with Adult Friends for Youth now?
I guess yeah, you could say in a kind of distant way I am, but yeah.
Were you concerned about their ability to do what they have to do, given what was going on with the pandemic?
Yeah, it was, you know, just hearing from last year, just hearing that, you know, schools were shut down and not kids just not having people to turn to. It was just kind of mind-boggling because of how David and them are gonna work with students. Because when I was in high school, they worked with us in the school, you know, in the rooms and stuff like that. But I just it was crazy. I couldn't. Yeah.
It was a crazy time for everybody. Patty Kauhani from Boys and Girls Club, what was the impact that you guys noticed on young people, the young people you were dealing with? I think you're primarily in lower income areas. Probably a lot of those kids' parents were out of work or they were home taking care of them. What did you notice the kids were having the hardest time adjusting to?
I think the number one was food insecurity for the kids and the families. And, you know, we had 75% of our families experienced a negative loss in income for their families. So, you know, just thinking about how they're going to pay their bills and how they're going to prioritize paying their bills. We had 25% of our families did not have technology or Wi-Fi at home, just like Annie and Deborah said. So we opened up our clubhouses so that they could access our technology and Wi-Fi. We used our clubs as distribution centers. We actually distributed over 45,000 meals in 2020 to our communities to help them. But I think if we talk about long-term impact, the kids really struggled with online classes with school. It was very, very difficult for them. And they really needed to have somebody there who could help them. And when mom and dad are either working at home or trying to find work and they're worried, they're not able to help the kids. And they really did need to have somebody there to assist them. And then that loss of socializing, when they finally did come to the clubs, we had to almost help them to remember how to interact with each other, how to play with each other, how to step away from a computer when it's break time and go outside, get some fresh air, you know. So it was a struggle, and they still are struggling. It's not over. It's going to take all of us working together to help them.
Annie, what in terms of Halekipa, that the lack of schooling, you mentioned it when you were talking earlier, the lack of access to schools. How did the kids that you're dealing with react to that? Did they just sort of check out, or did they apply themselves? How did you get them to apply themselves and pay attention when there wasn't the more traditional, you know, school pressure?
Right. So we took it upon ourselves to really be that factor, to kind of help them change their mindset. We communicated directly with the schools themselves and having them issue school-issued laptops to provide for all the youth that came into care. I think that was one of our bigger things, just so that they can have access to it. And then just really being that mentor, staff, teacher presence, helping them follow through, making sure they're doing what they need to do. Of course, you know, spending multiple hours in front of a computer screen can be frustrating for the youth, and they'll just kind of check out throughout the day. But being a little bit more understanding to them and everything that they're going through, and then encouraging them all the time to just kind of push through, I think we've been able to make positive strides throughout the year.
Did you see, particularly among your kids that already were suffering from some sort of emotional issues? Did you see them deteriorate, or what did you notice? Was there deterioration or higher levels of anxiety or depression in your clients?
Right. I think definitely there was a lot more. I mean, all the youth that come, they come already experiencing some type of trauma. Being with COVID going on, I think the trauma had just kind of doubled everything. Lots of emotions going on. The sensitivity was very, we had to be conscious about that all the time. But I think in just training our staff to be a little bit more open-minded, working with the youth a lot more. I think our focus was building relationships and just kind of concentrating on that to have the youth be able to trust in us, to trust in all the help that was available. I think that's kind of what helped us throughout the whole thing.
And then Deborah Spencer-Chun at Adult Friends for Youth, I don't know how to put this in a politically correct way, but I mean, you're dealing with kids who are oftentimes either involved with criminal behavior or they are on the edge of criminal behavior. There has been a perception in the community that crime has gone up, especially youth crime. We've had some examples of very young people getting involved in some very high-profile crimes. Were you folks observing that, and what role were you able to play in perhaps dealing with that?
Right. And so, our first and foremost is providing the counseling, and we do long-term counseling. We average about 3 to 4 years with our clientele, and we work with groups as whole entities. So if Lester is referred to us, we look to all of his peers and work with them in groups. So the pandemic kind of added to that. But we also knew that, this was a time when families were stressing, the kids could feel the stress from the families because they have to be home, crime would go up. And that was our concern. But because we was helping them heavily on the education side, we have to revamp too. So what we did was we hired former youth who just graduated from high school to help with the education side, since they were much more privy to how to do the Googles and all of that, the classroom Google stuff. So they could help our kids so that our staff could now move away from the educational side and really pay attention to get back to the counseling, heavily into the counseling, so that we could prevent a lot of those things. But yes, definitely, during the pandemic, we were hearing about all these little boutiques getting broken into and so forth, and kids are stressing. They're trying to get what they can too, because they hear and they could see what was going on at home, so they were reacting to a lot of those. So our counseling had to be first and foremost.
I imagine also their parents were stressed out and maybe not as available to them also, right? So you step in as a parental role.
Right, and definitely that often becomes the case, and I'm sure this is for Halikipo, and you become the surrogate parents in so many ways, and not because the parents can't, but because of the stresses that they have on, many of our parents work 2 to 3 jobs, and suddenly everything's being shut down, and they got to figure out how to pay for stuff. So it's that catch-22, what am I going to do? I can't really help myself. How do I help my kids too? So it's been very stressful, and we see, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon, to be honest. But we can, knowing that there are services, and that's what's going to be very important for the community to understand that, nonprofits like the 3 of us here are very important in so many different ways, and we do different things, and so, but it's always, every part is important, especially when you're dealing with the kids at risk. And then you're dealing with kids at high risk. So there's all these different levels, and they need the different services.
Lester, when you, as a family man, a father, were facing this pandemic, did you think about maybe the skills that you learned or what you learned at Adult Friends for Youth? And how did what you went through at Adult Friends for Youth so many years ago prepare you for this? I mean, no one could really be prepared for it, but I mean, what kind of things did you pick up for that? What did they do for you that made you capable of handling this with your own stresses?
Yeah, like Debbie was saying, they work with clients for a span of years, and even after 4 years, they still were working with me. And there's this one thing that Mo told me. He said, you're just going through a crossroad. It's just a crossroad, and through that, it just reminded me that whatever I'm going through, it's just a stumbling block. It's just a crossroad that you can get over this. You just stay strong. And I mean, besides the pandemic last year, it was crazy for me as well. With the family and stuff like that, with the twins being born. But there was so many support from communities, and definitely Adult Friends for Youth were there for me. It's just amazing. I'm still here. I'm still friends with Adult Friends for Youth. So
Yeah, it's great to see such a success story. Question for Debbie and Annie: was there anything you did differently during the pandemic that turned out to be a good idea, and you will keep doing it? That's an interesting question for all three of you. Annie, why don't you start? What positive things did you guys pick up? New skills that you guys pick up that you're going to be able to apply?
Right. So I think definitely the trainings that we've been able to have our staff participate in, focusing on building relationships, and then being creative in how to engage the youth, / how to entertain them throughout the day, especially during COVID when everything was sort of kind of locked down, to just kind of keep them motivated, keep their spirits up. It was a little bit difficult, but I think we managed pretty well.
Deb, you mentioned that you brought in the volunteer young people just out of high school to help both your staff and your clients. Is that something that I imagine it must have been very rewarding for these young people who just got out of high school, whether they even had a graduation or not, to have something worthwhile to do? Is that something that you think you'll be continuing?
Well, definitely. I think that we've learned that, they can, because of the way they can navigate the system better, definitely. And it's giving them the hope that, to go back to college and to do more. So, and they're not volunteers, we hired them. So that's the exciting part, that we could pay them, and we want to continue paying them. So yeah, I think there's opportunities. And when the kids look within their own neighborhood and they see these kids coming out and working for us, they're like, now aspiring to do more. So definitely we want to hire more of our young people.
How could you afford it? It's like you're in the middle of a pandemic when everybody's budgets are getting cut. How could you afford to bring in additional people?
Well, that was part of the PPP. And then, of course, then you still go after foundational monies. And I think the foundations were very supportive during this time. They were very helpful. Being able to fill the gap when the state couldn't at that time, and I think that's the beauty of, Hawaii too in general. Everybody's stepping up to the plate, but I got to commend a lot of the foundations out there. They were really helpful in, providing this so that we could hire these kids and continue the work that we do.
Patty Kahoni, let me go back to this first question. What new things did you learn, and what are you going to apply? And then I want to follow up with the funding question and the foundation question as well.
Sure. I think there was two main things that were highlighted. One was that out of the children that come to us for services, some definitely need more resources than others. Some need more, that higher school in order to succeed in life. So what we realize is that we have to have a very intentional case management program in our program, so that we have the kids that are coming, that are just there to have fun and play sports and stay safe. And then we have the kids that have a little higher need or a lot higher need, that they just need that special attention. So we are moving forward with that. We're going to make sure we incorporate a very definite cohort-based service and case management. The second one is that when we did virtual programs, it was like the clubhouse walls disappeared. And so we had kids from Hawaiʻi that were attending our Oahu programs. We were partnering with a school in Japan. We had clubhouses on the continent, United States. So that was really exciting, and we're going to continue with that. For the funding questions, I agree with Deborah 100%. The foundations in Hawaii, they came through. And not only foundations, but there were some really significant personal contributions as well. And I'm just so proud of this state for how everyone came together to support each other. And we also did not lay off or furlough any of our staff. We have almost 100 employees, and everyone kept their jobs, everyone kept their medical benefits, and I was very proud of that.
You know, Deborah mentioned the PPP money. Did you folks, were all, a lot of nonprofits able to access that? And what kind of help did you need getting that money? Annie from Halikipa, did you folks need to get extra help?
We most certainly did, and the help was provided. So I just kind of want to tag on to what the two ladies had mentioned. It's awesome to see how Hawaii just came together as a whole. All the needs were provided for, to be able to continue to support all the staff as well. I think that was amazing for all the staff to know that they were strongly supported throughout the pandemic. It's great to see.
You know, we keep talking about all the foundations. You guys could go ahead and name some names. Annie, where'd you get your most of your help from?
Well, I think a lot of our donor designated funds that come through Hawaii Community Foundation. We had the Ching Foundation, we have Weinberg, we have the H.T. Hayashi Family Foundation, Campbell Family Foundation, the Castle Foundation. I mean, there's just so many of them, and they all came through. They were just absolutely amazing.
Did you have to ask, or did it kind of just like all of a sudden people realized the need? Deborah, did you guys have to go pounding on doors, or did it just come?
Well, a lot of them were reaching out to say, you know, like the Clarence T.C. Ching Foundation, the Women's Fund. So there was all different levels. The Harold Castle Foundation, you know, we had Alaska. So all of them were actually putting out pandemic type of foundation monies and, you know, requesting for us to, you know, apply for it and stuff. So, you know, they were also modifying, and they were trying to do their best to reach, you know, different types of, you know, for us, the food was not, we weren't the distribution center. We'd pick up from Liliuokalani Trust, and then we would go and distribute. We would drive out to all the homes of all our clients and drop off the food that way, so.
Oh, so really, this was, not only was this a community recognizing a need, and I imagine most of your funders also realized that the state revenues had tanked, so your state grants are not going to come through. And so they probably knew right away you needed that. But I also am impressed by the collaboration between the groups, like just what you just mentioned, Deborah, that one foundation took the tools that they had, and then, or organization, and then they found another. Patty, you got any other examples of that where you had other nonprofits jumping in to help you and vice versa?
Oh yeah, we partnered with Food Bank, Kupu, so many with like Deborah was saying, food distribution. So we were the ones where folks would bring the food to, and then we would distribute to the clubhouses, and we had other organizations that came up and picked from us. I do want to say though, with our government funding, we didn't lose any of it. We kept it all at the county, state, and federal level, and I was very grateful for that. They were also very flexible. They allowed us to, you know, change some of our outcomes and change the way we were allowed to spend it in order to be successful in our outcomes still. So I'm very happy with our government.
I'm wondering if any of you also noticed the youth themselves that you're involved with. Did you get them involved in helping out other groups? I mean, was there sort of another silver lining there where there were opportunities for the people, your clients, to actually help others and then get some personal benefit or growth out of that? Deborah, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. With the food distribution, a lot of our kids jumped into our big, you know, our 50-passenger vans that went out, you know, and they helped to actually deliver it directly to the house, you know, packing, cleaning, all the work that goes into that, and all of them know, you know, to deliver the food. But also, again, you know, being able to help each other in the classroom, you know, being able to, when one kid was better in math, he would help the other kid, you know, another kid who was as good in math. So it was those kind of things that you could actually see, but you have to create that too, you know, to let them know that these things are okay. You know, there was a lot of panic whether they should be doing stuff, being somewhere, because, you know, you have to distance, you have to do that. But we made sure that we could clean everything, you know, wipe down the vans, do all this. so that there was, we were following the CDC protocols and so forth, but, you could still do it and make them feel it was okay to do it.
Annie Tuilamotu, did you folks put your kids to work?
Yeah, so a little bit more of the same. Hanekipa did partner up with Lilo Kalani Trust for the produce box pickups. And the youth are always there bright and early in the morning, setting up the tents, putting up the tables. They set everything up. They break everything down. They help with distribution. So I think that brings a sense of pride to themselves. And I mean, there's no problem. They're more than happy to help out. And it's been great to see.
One thing I'd like to ask Lester, how do you feel when you hear about how your community responded?
It's amazing. Just groups like this, I gotta mention, when I was younger, I was part of Boys and Girls Club. I used to play basketball. I used to run youth clubs, leagues and stuff like that. So thank you.
Yay.
Amazing. There's so many programs out there. In Waipahu, there's the city and county Department of Recs. They have Ho'omana that I was a part of. I think it's just amazing when the community programs gather, especially with the help of the school. I think it's really important.
I'm going to quickly read a couple of comments that are coming in, less questions, but comments from Reen, I think, on Facebook. This is a very important topic and so much needed in all communities in Hawaii. And Carla from Facebook, mahalo to these folks and programs for youth. How are they funded and what can the community do to support our youth? I'm assuming all of you guys take donations, right? But are there other ways that people can help? Are you always looking for volunteers? Annie, do you guys use volunteers or is it all paid staff?
No, we definitely have volunteers that come in. Throughout the week, we have people that come in and do music therapy. We have people that come in and talk about building life skills. We have people that come in and teach jujitsu. We have a yoga teacher that comes in. So whatever services are available, we definitely want to link up with them and see how we can get them engaged with our youth.
And also, Debbie from Adult Friends for Youth, do you folks work with volunteers so much other than your own? You mentioned your own staff too.
Yeah, most of the work though that the people that volunteer is more on the clerical side to help, with things that our clinical staff needs to file and do those kind of things. It's a little tougher to do some of the counseling but we do have, like Annie had mentioned, people once in a while will come in and they'll teach music or guitar or what have you, so it's those kind of things with the interest that the kids have. And so we always try to link up volunteers with what our kids' interests are right now.
And Patty Kauhani from Boys and Girls Club, what can people do? I mean, again, I'm sure you would take their money, but what other things can people do to help you?
Well, I mean, in addition to what Annie and Deborah were saying, we use them for programs, volunteers, and when we partner with corporate organizations and they send their staff over and bring their expertise, so they'll teach our kids and families, say a banking or accounting person will come over and talk about how to file income tax returns, how to open a bank account, money matters. We partner with local chefs and the Hawaiʻi Egg Foundation. They come in and bring farm to table cooking lessons for the kids and give them groceries to go home and cook for their families once they learned how to make a dinner. So there's a lot of ways that they can come in and help us with programs. I think the other thing that we really appreciate is introductions and building relationships. We want to be able to reach into the communities at government levels, through the DOE, anywhere we can that can help to highlight what we need and highlight what our kids need and help us all, to be able to provide what the kids need to succeed in life.
I appreciate how positive this is, but this question does remind me that there's some very serious, scary things that have been happening in our community because of the pandemic. This question anonymously, did the panel notice any trickle-down effect due to increased reports of domestic violence and stress in the community? I don't know if you can still hear me, but we just lost our lights again in the studio, and I'm not sure who can hear me or who can respond. Okay, so Patty from Adult Friends for Youth, did you folks see families struggle more so during this pandemic, and what kind of things did you have to do about that?
Do you want me to take that, Deborah, or do you want to?
I'll follow right after you.
Okay. There was definitely struggles. With us, our kids come to the clubhouses to be safe. And for the kids that could not come to the clubhouses anymore, they lost their safe place. So when there was an increase in substance abuse or domestic abuse at home or just stress in general, where did they go to find that comfort and support? So we saw an increase in suicide ideation, cutting, depression, just anxiety in general, definitely.
And what can you do about that when you see that in your clients? I mean, you folks have a level of expertise, but do you need to bring in extra help when that happens?
Well, for us, because we provide the counseling, most of our staff have college degrees in social work, and so the counseling is provided. If, of course, we also referred when, as needed. Most of the work that we found that we had to do that was really the runaways after a while. The kids running from home from all the stressors that they were having and they were running. So it was counseling around those, but also doing family counseling, and mediation, bringing the families and the kids together to talk about why they were running. And so some of that, not so much the domestic violence was coming out as strong, and I'm sure that was there, but we were dealing with other issues as far as the runaways and the crimes. Yeah.
And then, sorry, I've got a light on here so I could find my way around. Patty Kahani from Boys and Girls Club, what did you notice in your among the folks you take care of? I mean, certainly you mentioned the economic issues, the food insecurity, and so on. But how about the emotional issues and the support that your clients needed, your participants?
Basically it's the same as what Deborah's saying too, and I'm sure Annie's got the same. They needed somebody caring and somebody who was an adult that they could talk to and to be reassured and make sure that they're reminded of the help that's available, and for us to hook them up with counseling services, to doctors and medical care as they need it. And you can only do that when you have the trust of the children. And so we have trust. All of these organizations built trust with families and with children, and they knew that they could reach out to us without shame and knowing that we will always be there to support them no matter what they need.
And just in case anybody who's watching from home is wondering what's going on, we have lost some of our lighting in the studio, and now they're struggling very much to put some nice lights on me so I can still be handsome. Anyway, one of the questions that has come up from Facebook, has there been discussion with the youth you serve about vaccination or vaccination hesitancy? It's a very interesting question. Let me just start with Patty from Boys and Girls Club. Do you have a sense of that's a role for you folks to play in making sure that the people you serve are getting vaccinated or getting tested for that matter?
Yes, so we strongly encourage vaccination with our staff, and we share information with our families. And we hope by setting an example of the safety of the vaccines, by doing it ourselves, we'll encourage others. But for the most part, at this point in time, we feel that it's our job to share facts and to provide resources and to encourage.
Annie and Deborah, the folks you folks deal with are a little bit more troubled in many ways than the folks at the Boys and Girls Clubs. Do you see a hard time getting services, healthcare services, vaccinations, testing, and so on to the folks in your programs, or at least to their families?
Definitely, especially in the beginning, there was a lot of myths, about that this was a hoax and so forth. And we were just surprised hearing all of these. And so, we were able to talk about it through counseling and so forth. But even now, I think our young generation, especially, they rely a lot on social media. And so they're getting stuff from there. And, it's crazy how oh no, the vaccine doesn't work. It doesn't, so all these things do come up. And so it's still about letting them make their choices, but talking about the facts, having them research it themselves to look it up, to be, what are some of the facts out there, and not just on social media, through research and others, going on CDC and so forth, because they rely heavily. And I'm sure, Annie, that's probably the same thing for them, or Patty, but yeah, social media is unbelievable what our young people rely on information.
How do you handle that? I'm just curious. Just as a parent myself who watched my kids grow up in a whole different world than I grew up. I mean, you mentioned earlier, a couple of you mentioned earlier that adopting the technology was new for a lot of your staff. How do you help people with that when you don't even have may not even have the skills themselves? I'm talking about cutting through all the BS that you might see on social media. You have to look over their shoulders, or how do you deal with that?
Well, that's part of the work that we provide, the counseling that we provide, because don't forget, even for the work that we do, a lot of violence is portrayed on the social media, and a lot of fights start from the media. And so, we have to help them cut through the facts, even when it's about a fight, and then everyone goes to, back pre-pandemic, everybody goes to the park because they're hearing, and all the rumors that are going on to, and so now we have to take our students away and really have them think about, cut through, where did you learn this information? How did you get this information? Is the source reliable? Going through all of that, with them, walking through the steps with them. And then, you actually see some of the oh yeah, it was from my girlfriend's friend, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I don't know how reliable that source is, So that's, that was started then, so we could carry out during the pandemic when there were all these different stories about about coronavirus,
Frankly, I can't see who's talking because we've had a power outage due to apparently a power line going down across the street, across Sand Island Parkway, and so I can't see who I'm talking to right now. So I want to direct that question though about helping these at-risk youth through some of the challenges of social media. Was that Annie talking, or was that?
That was Debbie.
That was Debbie. Okay, Annie, I'd like to hear what your folks were going through with that. How did you guys curate that for them?
Sure. So with us, it's just really about sitting down and having that thorough conversation with them. Our youth haven't been provided the opportunity to get vaccinated through us, but every other week they do have the opportunity to get swab tested. And most of our youth get tested every other week. And at first, when we started doing the testing, of course, they were a little bit hesitant about it. They didn't want to do it. They had all different beliefs due to social media and just, chatter going around. But I think just sitting down, meeting them where they're at and having that open conversation with them, like Patty was saying, providing facts about everything, they were much more open to it. And we didn't see much resistance afterward. We just started providing opportunity for all of our staff to get vaccinated. So many of them have been taking advantage of that.
Patty Kahani, so at Boys and Girls Club, you were actually helping people with their schoolwork. And you mentioned that a lot of them had fallen behind. How big is the gap now, would you say, for folks in your communities, the difference between where they should be in school today and where they are? And do you see enough effort out there in the community or in the schools and so on to get them caught up? What do you see the deficit as being now?
There is a report in Civil Beat in February that said 34% of Hawaiʻi seniors were not on track to graduate. So we took that really seriously, and that's why we doubled our operating hours and opened our clubs in the morning so the kids could come and access their school lessons. So we had some kids that were coming in that had 30 or 40 projects or lessons that were overdue. And that's not an exaggeration. So we actually sat down with them, helped them to, get caught up and hand them in and get marked. So the kids that were able to access our clubhouses, we got them caught up. My worry is the kids that were not able to access programs like ours. And I don't know what those numbers are. And I think it's going to be shocking when those numbers do come out.
What are your folks' perspective, Annie and Deborah, on that issue? Your folks' programs really do depend on moving these kids through school and having them succeed at school, right? So Deborah, what kind of deficits did you see, and what did you have to do in order to make up for it? And were you able to make up for it?
Yeah, so most of the kids that we first start off with are already doing poorly in school to begin with. And so we were getting them back on track, and then the pandemic hit. So we really have to step back. And what our staff did, along with what we call our educational assistants, the former student that we hired, they did mappings of all our students to see what kind of credits they had, what they needed to do, and which class they really needed to concentrate on. And so we're going down to the wire right now. School ends next week, and they're still down to the wire, making sure the kids are getting these things done. I mean, and again, like Patty, if we only know what our students are doing, and we can just imagine the ones that slipped through the cracks out there that didn't get any other service. So that's what we're most afraid of, to see what it's going to bring, because we know when kids drop out, that also is a gateway to violence and criminal activities. So that's a big concern for us.
Yeah, and Olamotu from Holly Keeper, sorry. Same issue for you folks, right? And then do you have kids that may not be able to graduate that are going to end up being, I think you have to let them go when they hit a certain age, right?
Right, but so for everyone that comes in and they're already behind, our main thing is advocating for appropriate services. Also, during COVID, we had to look at the different learning styles, because some kids, you could put them in front of a computer and they're absolutely fine. Other kids, it's 10 minutes and they're checked out already. So we did begin to look at different learning styles, and those who could benefit from being in class, we strongly advocated for them to get those services through the school. And some of them were able to go in person. Very happy to see, though, that we have 3 youth graduating this year. So big celebration. It's really just like Patty said, it's spending the time with them. There really is no magic wand for that. You just need to be present, sit there with them, help them through it. And that's really the big difference maker.
I got a question from Carla on Facebook. Can you provide stats on the number of youth you are serving? I bet it's more than people realize. And also, I'd be curious as to what your capacity issues are. Do you have space for more? Because you're all saying that there's more kids out there than you're serving. Patty Kahani from Boys and Girls Club, I think we said you're serving 15,000. What would you say the need is for your services out there? And do you still have room for more people?
Yes, so the 15,000 was pre-COVID. So during COVID, we served over 3,500 kids through the clubhouses, and then over 20,000 kids in virtual programs. So it was a really different mix for us through the pandemic, but we're starting to build capacity back up again in the clubs, now that it's safe to do so. So we do have room at some clubhouses, and some clubhouses have wait lists. It really depends on the area and the community. And the only reason we have room is because some parents are just not ready yet for their kids to go to public programs like that. So it really depends on the clubhouse.
Did you find, Patty, that you mentioned earlier that you'd learned that you can extend yourself with the distance learning or distant connections online, so on. Do you see in the future being able to reach many more kids once you can get fully up to staff and so on? Is that one of your goals?
It is, but it's going to depend on the program, because it has to be super engaging, and it has to be hands-on and tactile. So, it has to be a cooking program where the kids get to cook along. Kids are sick and tired of being in front of a computer. I'll just say that. They don't want to. And who would ever have thought that we would have those words to say kids don't want to be in front of a computer, but they don't. They're tired of it. So it really will depend on the programs, but we'll make it happen if it's the right fit.
Deborah Spencer-Chen from Adult Friends for Youth. What's your capacity, and are there more kids out there that you'd like to be able to help but you can't? And what's your ability to ramp up if you need to?
Well, the main thing is, so we have about, through our main programs, we have about 600 kids that we're meeting with on a regular basis, actually. And then we had our Pearl Convention that is about promoting peace, empathy, acceptance, respect, and love in the elementary and middle schools. So we went virtual with that, and we were able to do 2,400 kids through that program with the schools for a week. But the capacity, for us is always dependent on getting the right people, the right staffing, because it's we're on call 24/7, for our clientele. They all have our cell numbers. The crime and the activities they get involved in is not between 9 and 5, so we have to be there, and it's long hours. So, having the right people, that's really where the capacity is. You can find the right people, the dedicated people, because, working with kids in groups is much easier than it is working them individually, so.
Hey Lester, I'm sorry, I kind of forgot about you when I was sitting here in the dark. I apologize, but when you look at the community, what are you most worried about when you see what's been going on and the different things, the learning deficits, the violence, the risks? What are the things you're most concerned about? What do you think as a community we should be watching out for?
Right. To be honest, I think it's the family cell. I think, just this whole pandemic, I think there's parents, it's just kind of, some parents are out of touch with their children because it's not that they don't want to, but because they, have to go out there and work and stuff. And I think that's what I'm concerned about. And I can relate to that because, as a youth, my parents worked because we just got here. They had to, for people that you've seen on the news, I think it's the same, and they turn to, friends and gang members and violence and stuff like that. I think it starts with family. If you don't have that family core, that value, there's so many pathways that you can, just negatively go into.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, Lester. Annie, Tuialamotu, where do you see your capacity going? And I imagine you're the kind of organization that would prefer not to exist, right? I mean, you don't want to have children at risk, but is your capacity to help people based on the referrals you get, or can people actually bring a child to you, or how does that work?
Right. So, Hawaiʻi's got over 20 different programs, and tonight I haven't really been speaking on the other programs, only emergency shelter. But as far as capacity, we do have programs that people can come to us. It's not necessarily by referral. A lot of times we'll refer to other programs within our own agency, just because we know the services are needed. So as far as shelter, I want to say throughout the year, we've probably had about anywhere between 140 to 150 youth that we've served in our emergency shelter alone. We do have 2 shelters, and each house can take up to 8 youth. So we've been pretty steady throughout COVID. But yeah, so that's kind of where we are.
Did you see a big increase in needs for your services, Annie, during the COVID?
We saw a big need for advocacy. A lot of kids came in and appropriate services weren't being provided for whatever reason. So that's kind of what we pride ourselves on, really speaking up for the youth, getting their voices heard, and helping them get the services that they need.
And it seems like you guys did a great job, all of you, and I'm very pleased to have been able to spend the time with you again. I apologize for the technical issues that we had. It was beyond our control, obviously, and our staff here, I got to say, they were scrambling mightily, and I appreciate very much our crew here able to keep this show going despite pretty crazy circumstances. It's not as bad as COVID, but it was pretty dark. Anyway, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight, and we thank our guests, Patty Kauhane from the Boys and Girls Club of Hawaii, Annie Tuialamotu from Halekipa Emergency Shelter, Deborah Spencer-Chun, President and CEO of Adult Friends for Youth, and Lester Orsino, former participant with Adult Friends for Youth. Next week on Insights, right around the corner, summer travel is coming and COVID restrictions are loosening across the country. Many people are anxious to start traveling again. We'll talk health and safety guidelines. Please join us then. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.